Well, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's live stream. Sorry I'm running a little late. I was at FayFest today, and I met a lot of cool people, sold a few books. I had met a lady who was talking about having me on at her book club, so that's always kind of nice. Hopefully, I'll be able to post some pictures a little later. Hang on a sec. I've got a new guest for us. Hang on. Come here, you little Dickens. I'm on you. Oh. Oh, somebody missed me today. There we go. Oh, hey, Ray. I'm glad we've got some festival people in here. We should be seeing some new faces, guys. We had a lot of fun today at the FayFest, and I think some of them are probably going to stop by and check out the channel and see what it is we do here. One of the things we do here is we do live readings on Saturday. So, that's what we're here for. This, by the way, is Cinnamon Roll. She's been sitting around watching my videos all day, so I thought I'd introduce her. I would have brought her with me to the festival today, but I had worried it might be a little too much for her. She's a sweetie. She embodies her name. She's just a big old cinnamon roll. Well, are you going to sit there while I narrate? Are you going to be a good girl? I probably. Always a good girl. I do my best, Blondie. I do my best. As you can see, I had a haircut for the event. I'm not quite as much of a woolly booger as I was last time you saw me. You're not. She is. She is a cutie. She has sat in her cage all day and watched my videos because she likes to watch YouTube while we're at work or, just out and about. She's been quite the little fan today, binge watching my playlists. You. Alrighty, so let's see what we've got today for our live stream. But yeah, it was a great time today. We had a lot of fun. I sat out and played my mandolin and sold some books. Helped my brother sell some metalwork. He's always a good blacksmith, so we sold a lot of hairpins and bottle openers and fidget toys and things. She is Blondie. She's a bearded dragon. She's my little dragon. She's a cutie. I saw a man at the fair today with a chicken on a leash. I'm kind of tempted to take some of my chickens to the fair tomorrow, but I'm not sure they're that well behaved. He looked a lot like Bert, too. I might take Ernie to the fair, but he's a little grumpy, so I don't know how he'd act. He likes me, but he's not a big fan of other people. No, he's not. She is. She's a little cutie. So well behaved when she's not trying to escape. Yeah, maybe next year I'll bring Bert on a leash. The guy had a squirrel tail rooster on a leash, and he was just bobbing around to the music every time it was playing. I don't know how it works. Me and some guy got runner-up in the costume contest. They seemed to like my Dr. Plague get-up, so that was cool. I enjoyed that. Let's see. Have we got any more business? I'm thinking about hopping on Squarespace next week so I can set up a website to sell books through. But, I think maybe I'm going to offer a little deal with the buttons. Some of you guys have talked about how you'd be interested in getting some buttons, and I think maybe if you buy a book, I'm going to put some buttons in there for you. And so, of course, like Leia and Bev are going to get some buttons since they won the writing contest last month. And we'll be doing another writing contest in December. We're going to do a Christmas horror writing contest, so that should be fun, If you'd like to enter, go ahead and get cracking. It's going to be open till December 15th, so, just get your finest stories together, and we will see how it goes. You are pokey, you know that? There she is. Hey, Leia. We were just talking about you and how you won our last month's writing contest, and I owe you a book and some buttons. I got to get with you guys next week now that my vacation's over. Alrighty, so let's see. Let me get some stuff ready here, and we'll do some live reading. Okay. I think next week we're going to rejoin our Kids at the Black Site, because a lot of you guys have said you want more Black Site kids, so I think we'll go that route. I actually was inspired last week, so I wrote a bunch of Black Site stories. I think I put like 3 or 4 together last week. So, we're going to read. This is going to be, I guess this will be part 4, because we finished midterm. So this will be part 4 in our Black Site 12. Black Site 12? Black Site 12 series. Pretty sure. So scatterbrain these days. Yeah, Black Site 12. So we're going to pick up with the kids after midterms. So, I hope you guys enjoy. None of Rebecca's usual group had been at dinner. The little girl, Masha, had been picking at her food when she sat down, but she left pretty quickly after saying that she wasn't really hungry. Where are you going? Hang on a second, guys. Come on, you. Let's get you back in your cage so you can listen, okay? Getting fussy. Come on, it's okay. Okay. Oof. You can sit on your rock and listen like you do during the daytime. Okie dokie, sorry about that. Alrighty. Hang on, let me make sure we're not getting any fuzz here. None of Rebecca's usual group had been at dinner. Let's try that one again. This new chord seems to be working out pretty well. Alright, let's try again. None of Rebecca's usual group had been at dinner. The little girl, Masha, had been picking at her food when she sat down, but she left pretty quick. But she left pretty quickly, saying she wasn't really hungry. Dex had been there, but only in body. She knew he'd taken a shower after the exams. His hair was still wet, but she could swear there was still blood on his face. She knew about the kid in the red band exam that had gotten his head popped, but she hadn't realized that Dex might have been closer to the action than she imagined. The big boy kept looking over at the table, not too far away, where Ryan was talking with the other red bands. They all looked much the worse for wear, but it appeared that Ryan had impressed them today. They had invited Dex to come join them, but he had declined. He seemed to be hoping that Ryan would decline as well, but it appeared that whatever had happened had changed their friendship quite a bit. Gerald was sitting with someone else for a change, a girl with a white band on her arm. Before we get rolling, let me silence my phone here. There we go. The two of them were chatting animatedly, and Rebecca couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Gerald had been her shadow since she had arrived, and it was weird to be without him. She remembered thinking he would drift off eventually. Most boys did, once they made some real friends, but he'd stuck it out, and she was more than a little sad at the thought that he might not be a constant companion any more. Of Dunstan there was no sign, and no one had seen him since the exam. "I think I'm going to go read some," Rebecca had finally said. If Dex heard her, he made no intention. Indication, sorry. He made no indication. Rebecca was heading to the library when she saw Dunstan walking shakily out of the play yard. Oh, yeah. Forgot to do our usual plug here. Gotta get our Duke Cannon on, you know. Whenever I do narrations, I always use Duke Cannon brand lip balm. Duke Cannon, send me some money. There you go. Mandatory Duke Cannon plug over. It had been a long day, and all Rebecca really wanted to do was sit in the library and find a book to snuggle up with. She'd been thinking about reading one of the numerous vampire romance novels they had. Not Twilight, but something Twilight adjacent. But something about Dunstan told her that he needed to talk to somebody. It wasn't psychic powers, that wasn't her bag, but it was a look that, if it had been worn by any one of her girlfriends, she would have seen her walking over with a protective arm and questions about what was going on. Dunstan was her friend now, and she wasn't likely to have any other friends in this place. Once it got what it wanted. She went out to the yard, finding him sitting by himself, and to her surprise he was drinking something from one of the special vending machines. The kindergarten had free food in the cafeteria and snacks in the TV room, but there was a special vending machine towards the back that would dispense alcohol. You had to scan your band, and you could only access it once a day, but she had seen some of the kids trying them out. Mostly it was the stress. She understood that some of them had never experienced anything more trying than elementary school, and now that they were responsible for something bigger than themselves, they were chafing under expectations. Dunstan really wasn't one to let it get to him, but it kind of looked like he was starting to crack a little. "You okay?" Dunstan jumped, like someone had caught him doing something he wasn't supposed to do. But when he looked up and saw that it was Rebecca, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Yeah, never better," he lied. Rebecca didn't have to guess. She could almost hear the lie in his voice. "We missed you at dinner tonight," she said, and took a seat beside him. Excuse me. Dunstan was looking longingly out at the setting sun as it went down behind the glass walls of the kindergarten play area. It was pretty clear that he was longing for freedom, but weren't they all? They all knew they had a job to do here, but who would ask such a thing of children? She supposed it was her own government that was asking, but it seemed unfair to expect kids to shoulder something like this. It would be one thing if they were in high school or maybe college, but these were elementary and middle school kids. She was very aware that she was in that count as well, but she started to think of herself as older than her 14 years. She'd been looking forward to going to high school before all of these dreams had started. But now, it seemed she might never get a chance to go. "Hey, Susan, we're glad to see you. We're reading our Black Site story for the week, so if you're just joining us, settle in." Dunstan was sipping from an airplane bottle of vodka, one of those little plastic ones that looked like glass, and he looked like dinner was the farthest thing from his mind. "Didn't have any appetite." "I can understand that," she said, as she looked at the sunset instead of him. Dunstan looked like he had seen any number of things that did not agree with him. He reminded her of the pictures in her textbook of soldiers that had returned from Vietnam. They always looked like they had seen the most god-awful thing imaginable, and somehow lived to tell the tale. Dunstan was drinking from the small bottle, but it was pretty clear that he wasn't seeing the sunset or anything else in the immediate vicinity. "I doubt it," he said, and he sounded like he hoped it was true. "No, really, I saw some things during the exam, too. Things that definitely made me afraid." They sat in silence for a moment, the sun sinking a little, as two of the younger kids came out to run off their dinner on the playground. They whooped and cheered as they raced around the plastic structure, laughing as they slid down the slides and went up the little rock wall so they could do it again. Rebecca wished that she could be that carefree again, caring about nothing so much as going up and down a plastic piece of play equipment. "Like what?" "Huh?" Rebecca asked, her mind wondering. "Like what?" Dunstan asked again. "What did you see that was so bad?" Rebecca thought he might be mocking her for a moment, but then she looked back and saw that he was serious. He wanted to know and maybe compare notes, and that scared her more than a little bit. It was really nothing too serious, but she wasn't quite sure she wanted to know what Dunstan had seen that made him look that way. Might be the sort of thing that would put her silly little dreams in perspective. "It's silly," Rebecca said, and when Dunstan held out the bottle to her, she heard the liquid jostling inside of it. "Take a sip of this. It makes serious things seem silly, and silly things seem very serious." Rebecca looked at the bottle, not trusting the liquid inside. Her mother had always insisted that drinking was for adults. She said kids who drink wound up in juvenile hall or in a ditch somewhere. Rebecca had been offered alcohol at a party last year, but she'd managed to turn it down fairly confidently. Now that she was sitting on a strange bench with this strange boy, she felt like it might be a little harder to say no. She took a sip, coughing as the acrid liquid made her throat tighten, and then she started talking again, and it seemed a lot easier. "Well, it's kind of a floaty dream. I'm floating around while everyone is supposed to be asleep. I can see people and what they're doing, but what I'm focused on is this door that's over by the main area. It's locked, but I know that if I want to, I can get in there. The door doesn't open, but I go through it, and then I can see something." "Something?" "I don't really know how to describe it. It's not really anything I've ever really been aware of, and it's not like anything I've ever seen. It's less like a person and more like a presence. It's this huge, noxious creature, this bug thing that just sort of is. I see it, and I start screaming, and then I wake up, and I'm not actually screaming. It's like I know I'm there, but it knows I can't do anything about it. It knows it can't do anything with me in my current situation." She didn't want to, but she took another sip from the bottle and winced. Dunstan had been right. The liquid seemed to make everything feel a lot better. Not a lot better, but better enough. It was easy to see why some adults fell into it and never came back out. It was kind of nice to not have to think about things for a while. "Sounds like we might have seen the same thing, then." Rebecca looked at him questioningly. She had expected him to tell her any number of things. She'd expected him to tell her how she had seen some little kid getting hit by a car or lured into a stranger's van. She'd expected him to tell her about adults hitting people and murderers creeping into bedrooms at night. She'd expected 1,000 different stories, but not to hear that he had seen the thing that scared her so much. If he'd seen it, then it could be real, and if it was real, then she might never sleep again. Do you mean to say that you've seen it too? Dunstan didn't say. He just sipped at his bottle of airplane vodka and kept looking at nothing. Dunstan, have you seen it? Dunstan kept right on not saying anything, and when he finished the bottle, he reached way back and launched it at the glass that separated them from the woods of wherever it was they were. Rebecca imagined the bottle sailing towards the window before it crashed into the glass and sent it shattering everywhere. Excuse me. We're reading Monday's story, which is a black site story, so if you're just joining us, settle in. She imagined how the glass would spiderweb and then be reduced to fractured obsolescence as that tiny bottle brought it all down. In a way, it would be a miracle, like you read about in the Bible. It would give them hope, like the kids here could be that tiny bottle as they smashed apart the whole place. In reality, it hit the glass with a hollow... It hit the glass with a hollow thunk and fell to the rubber ground that surrounded the play area. I didn't see exactly what you saw, but I believe I saw it. What I saw was different. What I saw was something real and alive. What was it? Rebecca did not really want an answer, but she needed one. She needed to know what it was and that it could be stopped. She needed to know that it was flesh and blood, just like anything else, and that if they all went down there, they could kill it and make it so the other... I lost my train there. Hang on. Hey, Winter, we're glad you could make it. If they all went down there, they could make it stop. They could kill it and make it so that no other kid needed to come here and be tormented and trained and eventually sent to see it. And she was beginning to think they might all be. Dunstan wanted to give her that reassurance, but Dunstan couldn't. It wasn't me that saw it. You have to understand that before I tell you what I saw, because I can't actually verify what it is that's there. What I saw was a memory, and memories can be funny things. What do you mean? Do you remember the first time you saw Santa Claus? Rebecca thought about it for a moment, eventually shaking her head. She realized that she couldn't remember it. Her mother had a picture of it, Rebecca, red-faced and squalling, as she sat on the lap of some jolly man in a red outfit. But she realized that she couldn't remember having been there, or what it had been like. You can, but you just don't know how. That's the thing. Every memory you've ever had rests somewhere inside you. You don't remember because you don't want to. You have other things to remember, birthdays and reports and things like that. But if you tried, you could remember everything that you've ever experienced. The problem is you don't remember it right. You remember it the way you remember it. I'm going to venture a guess that you were afraid the first time you met Santa Claus. Is that pretty much right on the money? Rebecca. Let's try that again. Rebecca shrugged but nodded. If you could remember the first time you met Santa Claus, you'd probably remember him as a big red monster that you were afraid was going to eat you up. That wouldn't really be reality. It was just an overworked fat man in a red costume, but to you at that time it was real. Memories are malleable, and people often forget that, but some of what I see is the true sight. I see what they saw, but often I can make sense of it because I have experience and understanding. I tell you all this so... Try that again. I tell you all this so that you'll understand that what I saw when Dr. Hammarskjöld took my hand may not actually be what lies beneath the building, but it's what he saw, and I believe him. Rebecca leaned back a little. Dr. Hammarskjöld, you saw something in his mind? Dunstan nodded morosely. I can usually block it out. I had to get pretty good at blocking things out, or I would have probably gone crazy a long time ago. The problem is, he grabbed my hand to help me up when I was already at a ragged place. I've been worn down by the exam, and I wasn't expecting him to touch me. There's usually defenses in place that I can put up to keep my mind from that sort of thing, but I didn't have time to put them up. I saw something. I saw a lot of things. But something I saw happened when he was very young. I guess it did. He might have just been short. It's hard to tell sometimes. I usually go by the height disparagement with adults, but the little doctor is, of course, little. Rebecca wasn't sure that she wanted to trust anything that he had seen inside that one's head, but she supposed that he couldn't lie to Dunstan through touch. This was Dunstan's ability, and if he said that he had seen it, then it must be true. She was still hesitant, but she pulled ahead as her curiosity got the better of her. What did you see? What did he show you? Dunstan looked around. The two kids had gone back inside after a few minutes of chasing each other across the play structure, and he leaned in to whisper in her ear. He was careful not to touch her, his defenses probably still a little ragged, and as he whispered what he had seen to her, Rebecca's eyes got very large. When he leaned away from her, she took a deep breath and told him that... I lost it again. Hang on. She took a deep breath and told him what he had already guessed. We need to tell the others. Dunstan nodded and smiled. I was afraid you were going to say something like that. All right, and that is our black site story for the week. Let me get a little drink of water. Oh, that's good. Whew. 1 down, 4 to go. Let's move on to our Wednesday Kashmir story. After all the back and forth during Halloween, I've decided to go back to just some random Kashmir spotlights. So I think today we're going to go to a very random Kashmir spotlight. So I hope you guys enjoy The Ballad of Adelaide Castor. Excuse me. Dinner's not sitting real great there. Adelaide Juniper Casterly was the oldest woman in Kashmir. She'd been born in 19-something or another. She couldn't quite remember. Not that she could remember much of anything. Well, that wasn't entirely true. She remembered sitting around the radio with her grandma and listening to Malcolm St. John, who used to be the voice of Kashmir. She remembered the squeak, squeak, squeak of her grandmother's rocking chair. She remembered the smell of herbal tea and the root rub that her grandmother would work into her swollen ankles every night before radio time. She remembered the way her dad would lean in the doorway of the old house and listen to the radio as he smiled slowly in that way that made her think he was put at ease by the somber voice of the man on the radio. Remembering her dad always made her think of her mother, though Adelaide couldn't remember her very well. Adelaide, Juniper to her friends, had been barely a year old when her mother had died. Her father said it had been an illness, but Adelaide had found paperwork in the attic that said her mother had something that would come to be called postpartum depression. She never remembered her mother being sad, though she only had maybe one or two hazy memories of the woman. In one of them, she was lying on a blanket with yellow flowers as her mother smiled fondly at her. In another, she was in a very white bathtub as her mother gave her a bath and seemed to be talking in a low voice to someone that was not her father. Whatever the circumstances, her mother had simply wandered off into the woods one day and never come back. As her father sometimes had said, I skipped it. Oh yeah. Yeah, Christy, every Saturday. Hang on, we skipped one. Never come back. Okay, let's start from there. Her body had never been discovered. Her remains were, as her father sometimes had said, a secret for the woodland spirits, and it had just been Adelaide and her father from then on. Adelaide was sitting in her grandmother's chair right now, going back and forth and back and forth, and listening to the what? The squeak. It's got to be the squeak. The preach. Yeah, we got to start our Tuesday, Thursdays again, I guess. I know you guys miss them. And listening to the squeak as the sun warmed her old skin. Every morning she got up before the sun and made her coffee and boiled a couple of eggs and cut some cheese from the wheel that she got every week from the general store. Then she would take her coffee and her breakfast onto the front porch and come at it as the day began. And what? I think that's supposed to be happening. Pick at it. Speech to text has some very interesting ideas about words sometimes. And pick at it as the day began. She watched the people of Kashmir go about their daily business. Adelaide liked Kashmir. She liked it a lot. She'd lived here since she was 3 years old, and she was the oldest resident of the town, as well as the oldest woman that anyone had ever seen. She remembered when the town was barely 20 deep. Her grandmother had been one of those people, and when her son had called her long distance on the wire and told her that he just didn't know how he was going to take care of a little girl all by himself, she had invited him to Kashmir and told him that she would be glad to help her. Adelaide missed her grandmother sometimes. Her grandmother had been a wonderful woman, and so full of energy, right up until she died at 98. Her grandmother had often said that she had no intention of dying, intended to go on living forever, but Adelaide supposed that time came for everyone. She wondered sometimes when it would come for her, but not very hard. When it came, it would come, and there wasn't much that she could do about it. She tossed the shell off her boiled egg into the yard, trusting that the ants or the birds would take care of it. They always did, such dear little things. Excuse me. Adelaide was proud of the 2 teeth that she still had. She still had what? Okay. That she still. All right. And even though her great-great-grandson kept nattering at her to get dentures, she never would. She'd gotten glasses, so she had managed to avoid the hearing aids. And that was as far as she intended to go. When the good Lord took her last 2 teeth, she would switch to broth, or she would use that food processor that her great-great-great-granddaughter had gotten her last Christmas, and have her eggs through a straw from then on. For the time being, she would enjoy her eggs and cheese and coffee while she still could. The glasses that actually belonged to her father, and thankfully, yes. The glasses had actually belonged to her father, and thankfully, they had about the same prescription. Her father was a funny little man, always writing and sending things away for the money he used to spoil his daughter. Her father wrote stories, but he also did copy work for different magazines. It didn't matter who, and it didn't matter what. He was just happy to do copy work for. He was just as copied. He was just as happy to do copy work for National Geographic as he was for Hustler. Some of them were jobs that he would close the door and refuse to let her look at, but he kept food on the table after her grandma died, and Adelaide was very fond of him. She could see him now standing in the doorway, his arms crossed and his glasses twinkling on his nose, and smiling as the man on the radio talked about what was going on in the town where they lived. Adelaide liked to listen to the radio sometimes, and there had been 3 different men who claimed to be the voice of Kashmir since Malcolm St. John had given his final performance and retired from radio. She knew some people swore by the television or, God forbid, this internet thing, but Adelaide still liked to listen to the radio and put on her own make-believe theater inside the gray matter between her ears. Mine too, Blondie, mine too. Ugh. Did not drink enough water today. Should have drank more water today. She tore off a bit of egg and wrapped it in some of the thin yellow cheese that she liked so much. She was always careful to slice it just the right amount. Not too thin, not too thick either. If she got it just right, then she could wrap a piece of egg in the cheese and then worry at it until they finally went down. It was one of those simple joys that made Adelaide smile every time it worked out in her favor. Simple joys like taking her clothes to the creek behind the house and washing them. This was something she hadn't done in nearly 60 years. Her legs and the arthritis had gotten so bad that a trip down to the creek would have damn near killed her. The last time she had done it would have been a year before her first son had died. He had only lived to be He had only lived to be about 30, and then he had died in a bus accident. It hadn't been his fault, but he was dead just the same. An 18-wheeler had run away and hit the bus squarely in the middle, and the doctor said he probably hadn't suffered much. He may not have done, but Adelaide had mourned him bitterly. Hey, El DeGusto, we're glad to see you, man. She had mourned all of them, the ones she had outlived. Adelaide outlived so many of them, but she would see them again at the end of the path. Adelaide had seen a lot in her time in Kashmir, some of it good, worked at the prison out in the woods. She remembered being about 8 years old as she leaned in the doorway and listened to her uncle tell her father about the terrible things he had witnessed there. Uncle Kevin said there were ghosts in the prison, things you could see while you were out on your rounds. He told her that He told her that the death house was absolutely haunted. Lost it again. That was a good compilation. And that she must always be a good girl so that she didn't end up in a place like that. The worst of it, though, was the things he talked with his brother. What? Oh, okay. Hey, Shanti, we're glad you could make it. The things he would only talk to his brother about in a hushed voice was the warden that ruled the roost. He's unnatural. He lives at the prison. I never see him go anywhere. And when he looks at you, it's like being looked at by a predator. I was hunted by a mountain lion once, followed through the woods as I hauled a fresh kill out, and having to be around him is like that. I don't know how that sounds. He's just a man like everybody else, but I tell you, it makes me wonder if he's going to lean in and just rip my throat out. Her Uncle Kevin had died when she was 18. He'd been killed in an accident, something to do with the electric chair. Everyone involved had mostly been killed, with a few exceptions. The warden had come to the house and brought them a plaque and a check, telling them that he sure was sorry for what had happened. Adelaide remembered peeking at him as he talked to her father, and she remembered the things that Uncle Kevin had said about him, and realized that he had been right. The man looked like someone wearing a very convincing costume, but not convincing enough to fool her. Oof. Hey, Master, how's it going? Man, I got quite a house full tonight, goodness. It's always nice to have company when we tell our stories. Adelaide had married a year later, married Thomas, who would be her first husband. And she had begged him not to go to work at the prison. Luckily, Thomas had went to work. What? Thomas had gone into copy work, just like her father. Thomas was a man of letters. He liked to write, and he liked to do the copy work, but he had made a pretty convincing newsman, too. Too convincing for his own good. Thomas had told her over dinner one night how he suspected there was a link between the prison and the number of people that went missing in the woods. He thought maybe the warden had something to do with it, but he couldn't prove it. He told her he was going to do an expose, and he would prove without a shadow of a doubt that the warden was responsible for the people who went into those woods and never came out again. Adelaide had been about 25, the two of them having only been married for 6 years, when poor Thomas went into the woods and became one of those people. They had a son by then, a daughter on the way, and Adelaide had married his brother William so as not to burden her father. William, however, had been plagued by demons of a very different sort. The kind of spirits that plagued William came from a bottle, and when they were upon him, he could be mean, and he could get angry. He worked for the Park Service, and when he was drunk and not in too bad a mood, he would sometimes tell her about the creatures that wandered around in the woods. It scared her, as it would scare anyone, but he said that they couldn't hurt him, and he showed her a symbol that all the men in the Park Service carried. If only Tommy had had one of these, then maybe he wouldn't be in the ground. I kick myself every day for not giving him one. But Head Ranger Gabriel says it's a secret that we're not allowed to share with non-members. Adelaide wished the creatures in the woods had done for him too, but she had gotten him herself. Adelaide was tough for a woman not even in her 30s, and she wouldn't stand by while he put his hands on her. Hang on. Huh. While she would stand by as he put his hands on her, she wouldn't stand for him laying a finger on the children. Most of the time, he would get tired after a few minutes and fall asleep on the couch, and she would throw a blanket over him and get back to whatever she'd been doing. It wasn't until he started putting his hands on her children, his niece and daughter, his niece and nephew, that she put a stop to it. She had come home from the market one day and found him holding Marcus up by his shirt, shaking him and yelling at him for dropping a bottle of whiskey. Adelaide hadn't said a thing. She'd walked into the kitchen, grabbed her skillet, and racked him across the back of the head one good time. She told the sheriff he had taken a tumble down the back steps, but whether he believed her or not, it didn't really matter. The problem was solved, and life went on. Her third husband had been nicer, a banker who came to town very suddenly and started at the bank in Kashmir, where she had gone to work to support her children. He was a funny man. He liked to collect boats and build them inside of bottles. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and for the most part he was amiable. When he died 25 years later, she had never gotten remarried. Her kids were grown and out of the house. She just decided to live her own life. She turned on the radio and listened to John Marvolo, tell her about the new arrivals and the town gossip. That was basically all news was anymore, a series of gossip. Nothing important much happened in Kashmir anyway. The town had its secrets, but you never heard about them. Most everybody knew the secrets, but if you told, it was like telling someone what your wish was on your birthday. If you told, it wouldn't come true. Adelaide leaned back in her rocker and left the soft... Blech. Try that one again. Adelaide leaned back in her rocker and let the soft sound of the slats lull her into a semi-state of unconsciousness. She was still awake enough to hear Mrs. Gordon when she called her name, but she only raised a hand as the woman went jogging by. Mrs. Gordon was always jogging somewhere, but she never seemed to go anywhere. She'd probably jog until they put her in the ground, and Adelaide wondered if she would be there to witness it. She supposed that she probably wouldn't. How long could a woman live, after all? And we would like to wish a very special resident a happy birthday, John was saying on the radio. Adelaide shook her head. She wanted to be conscious for this one. We would like to wish a very happy birthday to Miss Adelaide Juniper Castor. She turned 126 today, or at least as far as anyone can tell. Happy birthday, Adelaide, and we hope you'll be around for many more to come. As the soft music wafted over her, Adelaide let the rocker actually put her to sleep. She couldn't have said if she would be alive next year to ring in another birthday. She couldn't have even said if she would wake up from the nap she was slipping off into. But she could say that she was happy to celebrate another birthday right here in Kashmir. Hey, Nancy, we're glad you could make it. That is our Kashmir story this week. Ooh, that's awful, Shanti. Give me just a second, guys. Let me flip the fan on. It's getting a little warm in here for my taste. No, somebody's sulking in her water bowl because I won't let her wander across my desk. I'll come pick you up when I get done with my live stream. My goodness, such theatrics. Let's see. What next? What next? Excuse me. I guess we'll go ahead and do our Friday story before we move on to our short stories for Tuesday and Thursday. This week's Friday story is going to be a Kashmir hospital story. Excuse me. Because we haven't had one of those in a while. Oh, I let Nermal wander outside, but Nermal's a big boy. He can take care of himself. Plus, Cinnamon Roll's a little smaller. I don't want her to get hurt. Anyway, we're going to do a Kashmir hospital story. It's called Overtime, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It was the scariest time of my life. Scarier than facing down Shaky Leg Mary, at least I assume so. Scarier than the ghost of the electrician that I had banished from the third floor, and even scarier than Hattie on her worst day. I was sitting in Miss Blair's diner, Frankie sitting across from me, as we waited for Miss Blair to bring us exactly what we wanted, even though we hadn't ordered anything. That was the great thing about eating at the diner. You didn't ever have to look at the menu because Miss Blair would bring you exactly whatever it was you were hungry for. I had been in here once with David and Carl and watched her bring out a T-bone steak the size of a chew toy for this guy that had clearly not been here very long. He had looked at her and said that he couldn't afford something like that. And Miss Blair had just put her hands on her hips and asked him why he had bothered coming in then. The guy had looked mesmerized, just eating his steak and paying his bill before shuffling out in a confused stupor. We had all laughed at it. Ugh. We had all laughed at him on that day, but it never occurred to me how strange it was that she always knew just exactly what you wanted. "Okay," she said, coming out of the kitchen with 2 plates. "I've got lamb chops for the lady with green beans and field peas, and I've got meatloaf with mashed potatoes, gravy, and hush puppies for the gentleman." I smiled as I unwrapped my fork. It's wild how you always know exactly what I'm hungry for. If I took a... I said as I took a bite of the meatloaf. It was perfect, exactly the way my mother used to make it, and I savored every bite like somebody might take it away from me. Miss Blair just laughed. "Well, honey, that's why people come in here in the first place. I'm never wrong, and it's always out fast." She bustled back towards the kitchen, stopping to grab a jug of tea so she could refill someone's cup. And Frankie took a bite of the lamb chops and made a noise that sent a warm feeling through my belly. These are so good. They taste just like the lamb chops my grandma used to make when I was a kid. I don't suppose that Miss Blair's was here before you went into the stairwell, were they? Frankie shook her head. "Nope. There was a diner here, but it was owned by an old guy and his son. The food was good, but they certainly didn't know what you wanted before you got here. I guess Miss Blair took over after they died or something. We... Allergies are acting up. We chewed and swallowed and enjoyed our meal for a moment. Just as it began to feel a little awkward, I swallowed a mouthful of meatloaf and asked what the hospital was like before she went into the stairwell. She told me it was basically the same as it was now, just a little smaller. Back then, they only had 3 floors, and there wasn't a lot of the fancy stuff like they had now. The 3rd floor had apparently been weird back then, too, but not quite as weird as it was now. People still went missing, and they'd always had ghosts, and she had only heard rumors about the stairwell before she became part of it. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. My little brother is a trooper, but I know I keep him awake a lot. Sometimes I just wake up screaming. I dream that I'm trapped in there again with the things that chase me or the things that hunt me. It's getting easier, but some days it's really hard to work less than 30 feet away from the door that seemed to have transported me 50 years into the future. I chewed some more and tried to think of what normal people talk about when they're on dates. Frankie asked me a while ago if I wanted to go to dinner with her, but then her brother had gotten sick and her evenings had been spent giving breathing treatments and taking him to the hospital. That was okay. I'd been going to lessons at Grandpa's house and trying to avoid the usual diseases that wandered around the hospital on 2 legs this time of year. When she called to remind me a week ago that I owed her a dinner date, I had almost forgotten. I was glad she had remembered, though, because I'd been looking forward to it back when she had suggested it. There we go. Looking forward to it and petrified by the idea of it. Don't get me wrong, Frankie is a wonderful girl. She's kind, sweet, she can carry a conversation very well. The fact that she's also a knockout is beside the point. She's really gotten used to the modern conveniences that I barely think about anymore. She seems to really enjoy my company for some reason. That probably deducts points from her for poor taste, but I certainly appreciate it. I'm not going to go so far as to say I'm in love with her, but the idea of going out a few more times for dinner is certainly appealing. It had been a while since anyone had been interested in me, romantically or otherwise, and I'd be the first to admit that it was kind of nice to have someone to talk to. That's someone that's not just interested in having me tell them ghost stories. So, Carl says you're the resident ghost whisperer in the hospital. I shook my head. It was like she had read my mind. I don't know about that. I help out sometimes with stuff that's outside Carl's wheelhouse. John, I watched you go into the stairwell and come out with a little boy while talking to someone that I couldn't see. Carl says you helped him out with a big problem last year that he didn't want to tell me about. David claims that you exorcised the spirits out of the basement, and Mark says that you made the weird phone calls he was getting stop. Did you know we were getting those weird phone calls in my time, too? They were coming from a different floor, but I suspect that it's probably the same thing. I'd have to have a talk with my so-called friends next time I saw them. Sounded like they'd been telling stories again, and I didn't want Frankie to think I was weird or something. Getting stuck in a ghost trap like she had for 50 years was one thing, but talking to spirits, communicating with the dead, that was quite another. I didn't want to get a reputation as a weirdo, so I generally kept my inquiries centered around my book. And it had worked so far, but it appeared that some of the people close to me had noticed too, and were telling other people about my exploits. Well, look, it's not as if I go looking for them. They just seem to be drawn to me somehow. I feel bad for them sometimes, so I help them out of a tight spot. Some of the ghosts in the hospital really aren't all that bad. I like to help them move on sometimes when I can. It's for the best for everyone. Frankie smiled as she glanced at her plate, which was surprisingly empty. I didn't mean to make it sound like you're a weirdo or anything. I thought it was kind of neat. It's always nice to have a friend who helps out when things go bump in the night. I laughed, about to tell her that we had both probably had our fair shares of encounters on the spooky side, but that's when my cell phone rang. I jerked up like someone had touched me with a live wire. I'd meant to silence that before we got to the restaurant. Thought somebody was coming in. Let's see. I fished it out of my pocket to do just that, but that's when I noticed that Carl was calling me. I checked my watch. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and it was my day off. There should be no reason for Carl to have to call me, unless something weird was going on. I sighed and answered, giving Frankie an apologetic shrug. I'm sort of busy right now, Carl. What's going on? Thank God. I need you to come down here to the hospital ASAP. There's something going on in the OR. Carl, if you need some help getting homeless guys out of the emergency room, then you gotta call somebody else. I just work the switchboard. I can't come in and help you. It ain't that. That's not what I'm talking about. And as if to accentuate the point, I heard a sound like someone throwing a stool through a window. There was a metallic clatter, a breaking of glass, and I... Oh. and I could almost hear Carl. There it is, all right. And I could almost hear Carl wince over the phone. What exactly is going on? I think, Carl started. Then he seemed to shake himself and gain some confidence. It's Shaky Leg Mary. It's the anniversary of her death, and for some reason she's decided to tear up the OR. It's never been this bad, kid. Usually she just makes a lot of racket and then goes about her business, but this time it seems worse than it's ever been. I know it's your off date. I know you're probably out on your date with that cute gal from the desk, but could you please come and help me with this? I'll pay you if I have to, but if admin comes in Monday and sees the state of this OR hallway, I'm probably going to lose my job. I swiped a hand across my face. Whatever I felt about it, I couldn't let Carl lose his job over ghosts. I told him I'd be on my way in a minute. Then I hung up the phone and looked at Frankie. Oof. Goodness. I'm really sorry. Carl needs me to come to the hospital for a minute. He says it's an emergency. She told me that was quite all right, and that's when I had a crazy idea. Why don't you come with me? Really? Frankie asked. She looked hesitant, but also interested. Maybe she had heard about what I did from the from those friends of mine and was curious, or maybe she just wanted to see what it actually was. Either way, as I paid the bill and found her beside me, I realized she was coming, whether I wanted her to or not. We pulled up to the hospital 20 minutes later, and I waved at Thomas as the two of us headed for the OR. It's bad enough that I have to cover for you so you can go on a date with your relief, but do you have to bring her here and rub it in my face? Frankie tried to apologize, but I was in a hurry. I wanted to get this done before it got too late. Carl was waiting for us at the door, and he looked relieved. Thank God! She hasn't wrecked anything expensive yet, mostly just throwing around beds and chairs and things, but it's only a matter of time before she smashes something important, like a surgical laser or one of those breathing machines. See what you can do to make her calm down. If not, I don't know how I'm going to explain this to the higher-ups. I told Frankie to stay here, and I went into the OR on shaky legs of my own. Gotta wet the pipes there. Shaky Leg Mary was no minor apparition, no Hattie or prank-calling ghost who could be set right with a few words. She was old, she was angry, and she was going to be a pain in the ass. I walked in and found her tossing things around, just as Carl had said. I'd never actually seen Shaky Leg Mary, and looking at her made my bones hurt. She looked like the Crooked Man from the children's story, and it made me wince every time she went flying around on those smashed and misshapen legs. She turned to look at me as I came in, her eyes full of anger and hatred, but as she came forward, I put a hand out, and when I touched her, everything changed. I'd expected her to rip me limb from limb, but what I hadn't expected was to be looking at a mostly intact woman sitting on an OR bed in a paper gown. Excuse me. Her right side was crunched in, her legs were bent up like cheap accordions, and her face was awash with blood. She'd probably once been beautiful, but her skin was craggy and her hair was unkempt. The streets had not been kind to her, and she glared at me as if expecting me to scold her. What do you want? Why are you people always coming in? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I tried again, hoping to do a little better, but still sounded like my throat was full of sawdust. I, I came to take you to the other side. I figured you'd been here long enough and were probably ready to go. Aren't you tired? Seems like it might be time to pass on. Maybe get some rest. I expected her to get angry, but when she smiled, it took years off of her. Shoot, I was waiting for one of you to come get me. I think maybe I scared too many of them away, but you don't seem scared of me. Maybe that's all I was waiting for, was someone to really see me. I've puttered around this old hospital long enough. I think I'm finally ready to go. If that's what you want, ma'am, I'll be happy to take you to the other side. I walked out of the OR with her on my arm, and Carl and Frankie followed us to the stairwell, where the red-clad orderly was waiting. Well done. Your ability to calm them is impressive. I think soon I'll have to find another job with you around. He took her into the stairwell, and as the door closed behind them, it was like a final nail going into a coffin. Frankie and I walked out of the hospital a few minutes later, Carl explaining to his boss how a raccoon had gotten in and pushed a bunch of things over. So this is what you do at the hospital? Receptionist by day, ghost hunter by night? I shrugged. I guess so. Sometimes it feels like I do a lot more for the hospital than I even know. She didn't say anything else. She reached out and grabbed my hand, and the two of us walked through the garden and didn't say much for the rest of the evening. As far as first dates go, it had gone pretty well. Alrighty, that's our Kashmir story for the week. Let's move on to our two short stories. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to read a new one. Of course it's a new one. Most of our shit's new. This one's called The Thrift Store Mannequin, and I hope you enjoy it. There's a thrift store on the corner of Maryland and Decatur. It's not a very big place, basically just a storefront with a big window and about 1,000 square feet of shop space to play around with. They don't stock the latest brands. They mostly sell whatever they get from donations. But the mannequin in the window never fails to catch my eye. I've been taking that route to work since I got hired 5 years ago. Every day I walk past that thrift store, and every day I look up to see what that mannequin is wearing. It's always different, and I think the owner dresses him in something new before the store opens every day. Sometimes it's... Try that one again. Ugh. It's seasonal. He'll dress the mannequin up in a Santa Claus suit or a witch costume. But sometimes it's more weather-related. I've seen the mannequin in rain slickers and welly boots during rainy months, or in sundresses and sandals when it's warm out. The mannequin is nothing special. It's just a regular department store mannequin, but he seems to have enough legs and arms to put it in different positions to match what it's wearing. It's become my little ritual every day, and I enjoy it. So today, when I walked past the window and noticed what the mannequin was wearing, it stopped me in my tracks. The mannequin was dressed in a white button-up shirt with slacks and a pair of wingtips. He had a jacket over his arm, a blue windbreaker, and a briefcase in his hand. He appeared to be checking his wristwatch for the time, and as I saw him, it led me to look at my own watch as if mimicking him. The mannequin was wearing exactly what I was wearing. I work as an accountant, and my dress is usually pretty standard for the office setting. To see it on a mannequin, this particular one not even having a face, made me stop and take a long look at it. I laughed. It was a little absurd. I suppose maybe the owner had an excess of business wear that he needed to get rid of. Maybe he was hoping to move a few pairs of suit pants and some wingtips, and made a mental note to stop by on my way home to see if I could pick up a few new items for my wardrobe. The wind... The windbreaker was an odd touch. I'd never seen one exactly like that one, but it's probably a coincidence, just like the rest. I didn't actually stop by that day, but as I had to walk to work the next day, I found myself looking at the mannequin to see what it had on. I was surprised to find it was nearly the same as it had been the day before. White button-down shirt, suit pants, briefcase, and a windbreaker over its arm. The one change was the shoes. It wasn't wearing wingtips today. I had... And neither was I. I decided on a more comfortable pair of sneakers today. The mannequin was wearing the same New Balance shoes that I was, and that made me look at it a little harder. Couldn't imagine how the owner was matching the mannequin to me every day, but it was a neat little surprise. I went to work with a smile on my face, again thinking that I might stop in to see if he had any business wear before I went home. I didn't make it that day either, but I did stop in the next day. The next day was Saturday, and I had decided to go for a walk with my dog, Rusty. I was in my usual... I was not in my usual business attire. I was wearing the windbreaker that I usually carried, and I had a pair of jeans on and some running shoes, a t-shirt for a band that I'd liked since high school. It wasn't a very popular band, something obscure that I was pretty sure me and maybe 5 or 6 people had heard of, but it was a shirt that I had meticulously kept clean and taken care of. My eyes went to the mannequin in the window, and as it came into sight, I stopped in my tracks. The mannequin was standing there in the exact same clothes that I was, and it even appeared to be walking a stuffed dog on a purple leash, which was the same one I was watching. Which was the same kind that I was walking my dog on. I couldn't process what I was seeing for a moment. This couldn't be real. How had he found a copy of not just my dog, though this one was stuffed, but also the super obscure band t-shirt that I was wearing? The longer I looked at him, the more sure I was that his face was a little bit different, too. There seemed to be dimensions there that were different from the flat, obscure planes that had been there before. This took me a little aback, and I finally decided to go into the store and ask the owner about it. The owner was an old man named Mr. Tully. He was a guy who could have been anywhere from 40 to 60, and he always had these thick glasses that reminded me of Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys. He looked at me as I came in, smiling as he asked me what he could help me with. Rex was... Rusty was standing beside me, making this low, keening noise, as if he could sense that I was agitated. and when I pointed to the mannequin in the window, both my dog and the owner seemed confused. I want to know why that mannequin is wearing the same clothes that I am. Mr. Tully scratched his head and looked at the dummy that he had clearly dressed before setting out for the day. Oh, one of my assistants must have done it. Truth be told, I haven't dressed that dummy in close to a year. I usually have one of the boys in the back put some clothes on it before the start of day. He does look like you. That is weird. Do you want to buy any of the clothes on him? Maybe get a few more pieces for your wardrobe? I didn't know what to say. I ended up telling him I was sorry that I had made a fuss and just leaving. It was so odd that I really wasn't sure what to make of it. It's not every day that you walk in to find a mannequin wearing exactly what you're wearing, and I guess it caught me by surprise. The idea that he looked exactly like me, however, was one that wouldn't go away quite so quickly. I thought about it a lot as I went about my day, and that night I even dreamed about it. In my dream, I was standing there and watching the mannequin from the street. The longer I watched him, the more his features began to change in my mind. Around me, it looked like days were passing, and the sun moved like it was in fast motion. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, but the longer I looked at the mannequin, the more I realized that my own features were melting away. It took a minute. I was fully focused on the mannequin's face, but when I caught a glimpse of myself in the window glass, I could see that I was the one with the smooth face, and he was suddenly the one wearing my expression. I woke up tangled in my covers, and no amount of assuring myself that it hadn't been real would make me believe it. We're reading The Thrift Store Mannequin, if you're just joining us, so pull up a chair. Every day, as I went to and from work, I would look into the window of that thrift store and see if the mannequin had changed. Every day, he'd be wearing the exact same thing I was wearing, and it definitely gave me pause every time. I wanted to go ask Mr. Tully again about the strange nature of the display, but I just never worked up the courage. The dreams began to change a little too. Sometimes I would have the sidewalk dream, but sometimes I would almost feel that I had woken up and found him in my room. It was like being under the spell of a paralysis demon, and all I could do was lie there as the mannequin stood in the shadowy corners of my room and watched me sleep. He was never there in the morning, but the dreams were still very unsettling, regardless of which ones I had. The longer I took notice of him, the more I realized he was beginning to get a face to go along with my clothes. He was slowly growing a nose, eyes, a mouth that drooped slightly like mine did when I was injured or angry. With every outfit he wore, he would come to resemble me more and more, and I found that the transition was not one-sided. I too had begun to feel less than myself. I felt weak, like I might be getting sick, and I began to get lethargic. I started taking off work, started sitting in my apartment and not doing anything. Rusty would come up and nudge me with his head, but I couldn't bring myself to do much more than mundane tasks. Feed the dog, wash myself, feed myself, then sit on the couch and try to remember what my life had been like before I saw that mannequin. Then a few days ago, as I was working on my second week of sick leave, Rusty came up and nudged my hand, and I looked down at him for the first time in a while. I've been feeding him and cleaning up his messes, but the way he looked at me told me that he was beginning to see life the way I did, and that hurt me somehow. Just because I was losing my mind didn't mean that Rusty needed to suffer too. On a whim, I grabbed his leash and decided to take him for a walk. Maybe some fresh air would do me good. Maybe just getting out of the house would free me from whatever funk I'd found myself in. Our walk took me down familiar streets. Rusty was so happy that he was practically skipping. It was the first time he had really been out in a while, and you could tell that he didn't want it to end. He was absolutely enchanted by everything around him, and the more we walked, the better I felt, too. It was like I was a groundhog coming out of my den after a long winter, and the feeling made me happy. Rusty's mood was infectious, and I found myself beginning to skip the longer we went. People must have noticed because they were staring at us as we went about our walk, and I saw more than a few turn to mark us as we went by. It was great, the best walk I'd ever been on, the best walk in a long time. But it ended far too soon. It ended when we walked past that damn thrift store, my route taking me somewhere I hadn't noticed I was going. As we came to the window, I looked up without thinking, and that was when I saw it. He was just standing there. A true standing there. And I could see that he had a face and everything. The mannequin had transformed into me, completely and absolutely. He wasn't just wearing familiar clothes or familiar objects. He now looked exactly the way I did, down to the ripped pajama pants and the vintage superhero t-shirt that had been my pajamas since I was a teenager. He was looking out of the window at me, and as he caught my eye, I could swear he smiled. I stood there looking at him for what felt like an eternity, and Rusty had begun to whine and look between me and the mannequin. He seemed confused, not used to seeing a perfect mimic of his owner, but as the mannequin sat forward and put his hands against the glass, I began to run back to my apartment. I noticed that people weren't staring like I'd thought they were. They were gawking at me as Rusty and I made our frantic way home. Some of them laughed, others looked at me with open disapproval, and I wondered what exactly they were seeing that made them feel like that. People knew me in this neighborhood. I had lived here for a long time. Long enough for people to remember who I was, at least, and as I closed the door to my apartment, I caught sight of myself in the mirror that hung over the key rack. My face was gone. Nothing but a flat mannequin face that had been staring out of the window at me for so many weeks now. I put my hands up to prove to myself that I wasn't just seeing things, but there was no denying that my features had completely gone. No matter how much I touched or where I put my hands, I couldn't find any features on my face. Not a nose or ears or anything. It's as if my face had just been wiped clean like a chalkboard. Can't begin to imagine how this could be or how it happened. I've been sitting on my couch since I got home, and I've made a grisly discovery. I can still see, though I have no eyes to see with. I can still breathe, though I have no mouth to breathe through. I worry that soon I'll begin to scream, though I have no mouth to scream. It's funny. That phrase never made any sense to me when I read that story in college, but now it seems to have come home in a big way. I don't know if the story is a warning or just the passing of information, but all I can say is that if a mannequin looks like you, don't count it as nothing. He may take more from you than just your fashion sense. Alrighty. That's the thrift store mannequin. Let's see. One more story, and I think that's gonna do it. Think we're going to read The Burning Man of Grady. And that's gonna take us out tonight. So, this is The Burning Man of Grady. Well, thank you, Blondie. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoy it. In a lot of ways, Grady was pretty typical. The town is mostly agricultural. We grow a lot of corn, we raise a lot of cows, there's a lot of barn dancing and Friday night football, and most people can be found at Dusty's from Friday to Sunday having a beer with their friends. The kids ride their bikes in the road. You could get a baseball game at the park most days. And church on Sunday is more than just what's expected. The only really strange thing was the Burning Man in Hampton Field. Nobody really knows how he got there, despite what all the local kids will tell you. One story I heard was that he's a Civil War ghost who was hit by a cannonball and set alight. Another story says he's the town founder and he was set on fire after they found him embezzling money. Yet another story says he's a famous bank robber who came into town to rob the local bank when all the town's stock money was in it, and the townspeople set him on fire for daring to take their lifeblood. At the end of the day, though, it's all just a lot of talk. I'm about to call it a night myself, Lay. I totally understand. Oh, I'm about to lose my voice, too. I think I might be able to make it through this one. The fact of the matter is that the man has been burning out in that field for as long as anyone can remember. He is a man, at least as far as anyone can tell, but his age is indeterminable. His skin is the color of charcoal briquettes. His eyes are gone, with only hollow sockets left behind. And those who have gotten close to him say he mumbles ceaselessly. When I was a kid, the latest story was that if you approached him and asked him a question, he would answer it, no matter what it was. Sounds like a bunch of hogwash to me, my friend Reggie had said when the story was told to the two of us. Reggie was the smartest kid I know, but even he didn't know anything about the Burning Man in the field. He figured it was some kind of stunt put on by the farmers, the owner of which, Farmer Hampton, was the namesake for the field. We all explained to him that having a Burning Man in the field probably wouldn't benefit the farm much, but Reggie reminded us how his sons would set up at the edge of the field, sometimes even charge people to see the guy. It was mostly out-of-towners, curious people who blew in and out just as quickly. But more than a few locals had paid 50 cents to have a good look at the Burning Man. Terry Michaels had scrunched up his face, and I thought for a minute that he was going to take a swing at Reggie. "Reggie Carmichael, are you calling me a liar?" Reggie hooked his fingers through the straps of his suspenders, always reminding me of one of those Southern lawyers on the court drama shows. What I'm saying is that you heard a story, the latest story amongst a whole slew of stories, and now you expect us to swallow it right along with all the rest. Where's your proof that any of this is real? Well, my cousin said that his friend Billy said that his brother's friend, I don't know his name, went up to the Burning Man one night when it was raining. He said that it seemed safest to do it when it was raining, on account of the fire couldn't get out of control. Reggie scoffed loudly. "The Burning Man has never set anything on fire except himself. There's never been a report of him setting that particular field on fire, and the flames coming off of him are high enough that if he wanted to, it'd be pretty easy." Terry's face took on that ratty look again, like he was really trying to come up with something to say in the face of Reggie's doubt, but he must have figured that the story would speak for itself because he went on. "Well, he says he got real close, wanting to see if the rain would make him, like, hiss or something, like it does with regular fire. And he said that the Burning Man was whispering. As we all know," Reggie put in. "Well, for no particular reason he could remember, my brother's friend decided to ask him a question. He asked him why he sat out in the rain, and the Burning Man whispered that he had nowhere to go. He said it so clear that my cousin's brother's friend got a little spooked by it. He said he had never heard him do anything besides mutter. Nobody has, so when the Burning Man answered his question, he got up and ran like he might come after him. He told my cousin's brother, and then he went and asked him a question too. Please enlighten us. What great wisdom did he seek?" "Well, he asked him which mule was going to win the annual mule race at the county fair that year. The Burning Man sat there, just as he always does, but then he told my cousin's brother that Horseradish was going to be the winner. Well, my cousin's brother, who, I might add, is also your cousin," Reggie put in, "well, he goes to the fair and looks at the logistics. Sure enough, there's a mule named Horseradish in the list that year, so he put down a bet on the mule. He put down 25 tickets, which, as is all you're allowed to bet. And the mule actually won. My cousin won 500 tickets on the long odds and got himself a really nice prize at the fair that year." "Quite a story," Reggie said, clearly unimpressed. Ugh. "Yeah, well, I think I'm going to go to the Burning Man and ask him a question of my own," Terry said, looking at Reggie like that would solve that. "I'm sure it will be worth the 45-minute bike ride out of town to listen to that strange creature mumble." "Well, if you don't believe me, then why don't you come and ask him your own question? You say it ain't real, but you don't seem to want to come out to verify it. I think you're just as scared as I am." Reggie started to bluster, a pretty normal state for him, but I spoke up then as I tried to defuse the situation. "Why don't all three of us go? We can all ask a question and see if it actually answers." That seemed to settle that, and after school, all three of us got on our bikes and made the long ride out to Hampton Field. Ooh, excuse me. We had all grown up with the Burning Man of Hampton Field, and you would have said that doing so wouldn't have made us any less afraid of him. We had all grown up with the Burning Man of Hampton Field, and you would have said that doing so would have made us less afraid of him. You'd be wrong, though. The Burning Man was a town novelty, the one strange thing in a very normal town that seemed to give it some kind of depth. Sit up a little bit. It wasn't that we were afraid he would hurt us. The Burning Man had never moved anybody's knowledge, but it was more what he represented. When I was 6 or 7, we had gone out to the sheepfold and found out that one of the lambs had been born. The lamb was a freak. It had 5 legs and 3 eyes and no lower jaw. To this day, we had no idea why it was born like that. But I know that Dad took the lamb and its mother to the shed where he did the slaughtering and killed both of them. We didn't eat the meat. Dad just burned them outside the woods, and we never spoke of it again. In a lot of ways, the Burning Man was like that lamb. He was strange, a freak, and his presence didn't make any sense to anybody. He shouldn't exist. If people burned, then they burned until they died, and then they went out. The Burning Man did not die, and he did not go out. No one knows why he burns, or who he is, or how long he's been there. And any attempt to find out seems to go nowhere. The oldest man in Grady is Lee Augustus Packford. When the story took place, he was 105 years old, and he had been alive since the turn of the century. He told us, his words said through the toothless, spitty mouth of an old man, that when he was our age, the Burning Man had been in that field. He said that his grandfather had told him that the Burning Man had been there when he was a boy, and that would have been right around the town's founding, if not a few generations before. Perhaps the Burning Man had always existed in that field, some sort of poor, unfortunate throwback to a time before the town was founded, and before we had charge of the area. I don't know. I don't know. But what I did know was that the children in the town wouldn't go anywhere near wouldn't go any further than the wood fence that surrounded the field. The Hamptons had owned the field for at least 5 generations, and the Burning Man had been there before Mr. Hampton Sr. bought the land off the previous owner. He may still be there now. I don't know. But I assume as long as there is a Grady, then there will be a Burning Man. Reggie, Terry, and I made our way out of town and up the road that would take us to Hampton Farm. Terry and I had a pair of dirt bikes, the kind with the big ridge tires that were very popular at the time. Reggie had no bike of his own, and he usually borrowed his mother's. It was a banana yellow beach cruiser with a gigantic seat. Reggie's mom was a big lady, easily able to fill out that banana seat whenever she went to the library or the market on her bike. Reggie looked like a child sitting in his father's chair every time he rode that bike. His legs were long enough to reach the pedals, but he still had to get a running start any time he got on it. We always asked him why he never asked his dad for a real bike, and he always told us that he had better uses for his pocket money than a bike, that he would only ride every now and again. Those uses were usually comic books and technical journals, but to Reggie, I suppose they were pretty important. If you're just joining us, we're reading The Burning Man of Grady, so pull up a chair. It took almost an hour to ride out there. Reggie huffing and puffing by the time we finally made it to the fence and saw the Burning Man. The Hampton twins had football practice that afternoon, so we knew they wouldn't be out in the field charging admission. It was fall, and the Hamptons owned about 100 acres that they used for hay and corn and beans and the usual crops of the area. The Hamptons' field, where the Burning Man set, was usually... Try that one again. The Hamptons' field, where the Burning Man sat, was usually done with pumpkins, and this year was no exception. The Burning Man sat in a scorched patch in the middle of the pumpkin patch, and he looked exactly the same as the last time I'd seen him. He had his knees drawn up to his chest, his forehead pressed against those ashy and flaking legs, and rain or shine, sun or snow, he continued his vigil in the field year in, year out. The three of us sat on that fence for a moment as we tried to decide who would be the first to go and ask our question. You go, Terry said to Reggie. You don't believe in him anyway. If he's not real, then he can't hurt you, so go ask a question. Reggie, for all his bluster and scientific theory, looked like he'd rather tell Penelope Dale, the cutest girl in school and the one that he had a crush on, that he liked her and that he wanted to go to the fall dance in front of the whole school rather than take a single step towards the Burning Man. I saw his face pale now that he was right here on the fence line, and he seemed to be thinking better of all his smart talk now. The Burning Man had that effect on people. I heard educated men and religious men talking about how it was superstitious nonsense, and how they would go prove that it was nothing more than a hoax, only to stand here at the fence where we stood now, and never go a single step closer to that strange fellow. Well, Terry asked, clearly taking a perverse sort of pleasure in Reggie's new demeanor. Well, why don't you go? Reggie asked. You have all the information on him. Your cousin's brother's friend or whatever gave it to you, so why don't you go ask him a question? The two bickered about it for nearly 10 minutes, me standing in the middle, just staring at that Burning Man. I'd been out here before to see him. We all had, but there was always something about being this close to it that was mystifying. I'd never even heard of anything like him, and seeing him sitting there as the flames licked at him was awe-inspiring. I've been to church long enough to hear that people suffering in hell... I've been to church often enough to hear about people suffering in hell, and I wondered if this was like that. Is this what it would be like to burn for all eternity in the depths of hell? Would you eventually just bear up under it? Maybe you would just get used to being on fire, like you got used to having hair or wearing clothes. They were bickering so much that I never even noticed when I jumped over the fence and started walking towards the Burning Man. I had come all the way, and now I was going to ask my question. The more I looked at him, the more I knew there was only one question to ask. It was the question that should have occurred to anyone with half a brain. And as I stepped closer to him, I felt my tongue dart out to wet my lips. There was no heat rolling off him, something that should have been strange. Waiting for somebody to be a little quieter here. The man was basically his own personal bonfire, but there was no heat, no smoke, and as I came closer to it, it was as if it existed only for him, and it wasn't for the likes of us to experience. He didn't look up as I came. He didn't even move. The Burning Man just sat there, his forehead against his knees. And when I finally came up next to him, I felt like there was no fear left in me. All the fear had been burned out of me, and maybe that was where all the heat had gone this whole time. "How did you get here?" I asked, and when he turned his head to face me, I felt a little of the old fear crawl back up in me again. He took a single hand off his knee and pointed at the sky. I saw flakes of that finger come off and float away in the breeze. And when he spoke, it sounded like sand rolling around in a bucket. "I came from the sky." "The sky? Do you mean space?" He nodded slowly, part of his head and shoulders joining the finger flakes as the wind took them. Reggie and Terry were staring at me as if they had never properly seen me before. They couldn't believe I had come out here without prompting or goading and was now talking to the Burning Man. How did you come from the sky?" I asked, not sure how many questions I got or if there was a limit. He stared at me with his eyeless face, that face being more skull than anything, and said two words that should have been obvious. "I fell." Then I turned away from him. Ugh. Then he turned away from me, putting his forehead back against his knees, and would say no more. I didn't press him. I just walked back to my friends, got on my bicycle, and started riding home. I heard them coming up behind me not long after, and we didn't say anything on the way home. They didn't ask me my question. They didn't ask me what he had said. And I think all of us were aware that something strange and fantastic was at work. The story kept making the rounds. The people who had spoken to the Burning Man, always being someone's cousin's brother's friend, but neither Terry or Reggie ever told anyone how I spoke to the Burning Man. At least, not to my knowledge. If they told anyone, then I guess they either didn't believe them or they didn't care. If any of the kids went out to the field to ask him questions, no one ever admitted to it. I don't live in Grady anymore. Excuse me. I moved away for college and just never came back. My parents are dead now. My sister lives in California, and I really have no reason to go back to Grady. Even so, sometimes I lie awake at night and think about that Burning Man and find that I want to go back and see him again. Is he still in that field? Does he still burn? I don't know. But I know that if I went back, I'd be unable to stop myself from asking him more questions. Perhaps he does have some strange, terrible knowledge. Perhaps he's just some poor soul waiting for someone to take him into a killing shed. But whatever he is, I don't think it's me who is. I don't think it's me who's meant to ask him questions anymore. Maybe the children of Grady are the ones who are meant to ask. Perhaps children are the only ones with enough fate and enough foolishness to approach a burning man and ask their strange and often childish questions. And that's it. That's our stories for the night, guys. I do hope you have enjoyed tonight's live stream, and I hope you've enjoyed tonight's tales. We'll have to do it again very soon. And until then, this is Dr. Plague signing off before I completely lose my voice. I'll catch you guys next time. And until then, have a wonderful evening.